do whatever you need to do in this next minute or two to get yourself settled, and we'll begin shortly. Welcome to those dialing in.
Good morning, Amber.
Wonderful faces trickling in. We're going to wait another minute or so just to allow some space for people to arrive in the room.
Dorcas, hi, we haven't met. I'm Athena Katsaros. I'm the executive director of WIA. Just want to say thank you so much for doing this.
Of course.
I'm so looking forward to reading your book, and I just love the whole idea of it. I love it because I'm a sensitive soul too.
Yes. Oh, well. It's great to meet you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
Yeah,
Excited
I
for this
know
conversation.
everyone's going to love to hear what you have to say. I think there are many sensitive souls in our community.
Yeah. We tend to find one another, which is nice.
I think we'll find many of us here, yes. Hello to those who are just joining. Welcome. We're going to wait just another minute or two. So if you would like to grab a glass of water or finish up the email you might have been furiously typing just before this, go ahead and finish that so you can arrive and be fully present. And for those of you who are here, if you want to say hello in the chat, just tell us where you're dialing in from. That would be fun. With such a global community here at WIA, we love to see that. Okay, we've got some East Coast, West Coast of the United States. Sao Paulo, very cool. Welcome, Jacqueline. Liz from Nairobi. Leah from California. Good California representation today. Maria from Lithuania, very cool. Thanks for being here. Okay. Ontario, excellent, another country represented. Welcome, Miriam. Wonderful. Okay, well, why don't we get started? I'll do a few minutes of introduction. There'll be a few other people who dial in and join us, and then we'll roll into the purpose of today. So just want to note that we are recording this call. That's so that we can share it with the wonderful people who registered and weren't able to attend. We do this routinely. It's such a global community. We can't possibly show up at every time zone that we wish we could. So just know that we are recording the call and we'll share it to all those who registered. If you would like to watch it again, for those of you who are here right now. I just want to take a minute to really genuinely welcome everyone who is here today. The Women's Impact Alliance is so privileged to have such a rich community of diversity from women around the world. We have, from our Empowered Leader program alone, we have over 90 countries represented in our community, and it's just such an amazing thing that we've been able to slowly grow this incredible movement over time, and that you have all been right there with us the whole time. So we just want to make sure that you feel welcome and safe and included in this space. We are here to support and accept all beliefs and cultures and backgrounds. It's truly what makes this community so special and unique. And we just hope that you feel that warmth and inclusion today in this space. We're really, all better because of the diversity of this community. So thank you so much for being here. A quick roadmap for where we are going. I'm going to continue doing a little bit of introduction. I'll introduce myself as well as our speaker today, Dorcas. Then Dorcas and I will have a conversation for about 20-30 minutes, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. So everyone here, Please make note of any questions that come up. You can feel free to put them in the chat. I do ask that you remain on mute while Dorcas and I have our initial chat, just to allow for the kind of uninterrupted flow of conversation, but we would love to hear the questions that you have toward the end of today's call, and I will prompt those questions, and you can feel free to come off mute and ask those at that time or put them in the chat, whichever you're more comfortable with. And for those who have just dialed in, welcome. Feel free to tell us in the chat where you are dialing in from. We love to get a mosaic of, or an idea really of where you are calling in from. And welcome. Okay, without further ado, let's get going. So my name is Brittany Blitzer. I'm the Director of Strategic Development at the Women's Impact Alliance. I was a catalyst myself several years ago, so I'm very thrilled to be on the team now and helping this beautiful movement continue to grow and thrive. I imagine most people here are familiar with WIA, but in case you're not, and you're joining us for the first time, the Women's Impact Alliance is all about access to world-class leadership development for women leaders in social and environmental impact around the world. Our mission is to really unleash the potential and increase the influence of women leaders in social and environmental impact. We foundationally believe that when we support women and when women rise, that society is better, that our global community is healthier, more just, more sustainable, more peaceful because of it. So thank you for joining us in that important work. These Global Ignite sessions are a relatively new thing that we are launching at WIA. The point being to really give a space and a little platform to women doing amazing work around the world who we may not otherwise see in kind of mainstream media outlets. Their stories are important and deserve to be known, and we're here to do our little part to expand that, make sure those stories are known and shared. And it's my great privilege today to introduce you to our speaker, Dorcas Cheng Tozun. She's so many things. She's an award-winning writer and editor, communications consultant. She's been working in social and environmental change for 20 years now. It's been a focus of her professional career, really, since the beginning, it seems. So I'm curious to learn more about how she knew that was her calling so early on. Yeah, she's worked on so many issues, from energy access to HIV and AIDS to international development, youth development. Yeah, just a wide array of experience and interest in meaningful work. So we are so lucky to have Dorcas with us today. And then more recently, she launched, or I should say published, this beautiful book, Social Justice for the Sensitive Soul: How to Change the World in Quiet Ways. And when I saw this, I thought it might be a message that resonated with this community. I think we have kind of baked ideas of what an activist means, or what we think of when we think of the ideal change maker, and what that means in this kind of more traditionally loud, assertive world that we find ourselves in. So yeah, I just thought it was a very beautiful message. I really wanted to invite Dorcas to join us today. So all that said, Dorcas, welcome. If everyone wants to give, a visual snap, an emoji, say something in the chat, whatever you feel comfortable with. Yeah, Dorcas, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here and before this amazing group of women. I love what you guys are doing at WIA. I think it's so important and so valuable.
Thanks, Dorcas. So first question I have for you, really, as I kind of just alluded to, you've spent what seems like your entire career focused on social and environmental issues. Like, how did you know that was important to you, or when did you realize that that would be kind of your path?
Yeah, I had a really pivotal experience my second year of university. So we had something called spring break, right, which is a week off in the middle of the school year. And this university offered an opportunity for some students to do an alternative spring break. So instead of going on vacation, you are going and doing a service learning trip for an entire week. And so I went to a neighborhood of San Francisco. So I'm from the Bay Area in California. and it's called the Tenderloin. It is a pretty under-resourced neighborhood, continues to be today. And our focus was really on understanding why people didn't have housing, why they were living on the streets. And so we spent an entire week doing community service, talking to people, interviewing people, really seeing what life was like for them and trying to understand what was going on. And it was the first time I had been raised in a family. I love my family. They're wonderful people. And we very much came from the idea of personal responsibility, right? If something goes wrong in your life, it's because you made poor choices. And while that may sometimes be the case, I didn't have the full picture of understanding. No, actually, there are real institutions, systems that are stacked against people, that are holding people back. And so that was something that really struck me in our time in San Francisco of people could do all the right things that society's telling them to do, and they still can't make it because there's just so many forces working against them. And so when I began to recognize, okay, so there's these systems, institutions, processes that have been set up to work against people, then surely there are ways that we can undo that, because those are institutions led by people. So let's have people change it. And so since that time, and I think I was 19, 20 years old at the time, it felt right, like in my soul of like, this is why I'm here. This is the most meaningful work I could pursue to try to ensure that our communities are more equitable and inclusive, and where people can live with dignity and health and safety, and have the opportunities to pursue what they want to do and to become who they truly want to be.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Now, this is a big question and so much a part of your book, but how did your relationship with social justice evolve? Like you're a recent grad, you want to go out there and do your part in the world of social justice. Like, what did that mean to you at the time? What did that look like? How did your story start to unfold at that point?
Yeah, so when I finished university, I started working for a nonprofit or NGO here in the Bay Area. I was actually at a foundation first, but doing work in the community, it was an unusual position for a foundation. We were managing a community development project locally. And then, moved on to a few other things in successive years. And I very much bought into the mindset, which, I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense, of, I had to work longer. I had to work harder. I had to work all the time because the stakes were so high. The causes were so important. And so in my 20s, I just worked constantly, as much as I could. I would work all day in the office, and then I'd go home and I'd keep working. And even if I wasn't working, I was thinking about work, constantly trying to figure out, okay, how do I do more? How do I do better? And I put a lot of pressure on myself to figure it out, of like, what is my one thing that I feel really called to do? How am I going to change the world? And again, I think that desire to change the world is a beautiful thing. At the same time, it was such an incredible burden to put on myself as one individual, right? Like just one person. It's in my 20s. There's a whole lot that I did not know, and I didn't even know what I didn't know. And so very soon after I entered my working career, I started burning out and was pretty much on a 2-year cycle of regularly burning out. And it got progressively worse, actually, as I got older. I think that's part of how the body works, right? When we tax it, it becomes less tolerant to stress over time. And I kept thinking, oh, if I just keep working, I can like push past this. But that's very much not the case, and had a really, really awful experience with burnout when I was 26, and fell into a very deep depression. Basically couldn't leave bed for months at a time. It was about, I think, 4 months that all I could do was sleep, cry. There was a lot of crying. Eat, and talk to a therapist. I couldn't do anything else for 4 months. And I wish I had learned my lesson at that point, but I didn't. I sort of recovered and then just kept going until I had another really terrible burnout at the age of 30. And I think that's when I finally realized something has to change. Like the way that I am operating is fundamentally unsustainable. As much as I love the work that I'm doing, I'm going to kill myself in the process if I keep going the way that I'm going.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's a very courageous thing to open up about, and a thing that is probably much more widespread, especially in a community of people who care about social justice. I'm curious what, when you kind of finally acknowledged internally, like something needs to change, like what, where did you go next? Like what's the first step you take toward a different path?
I will not say that it was an easy process. It was actually extraordinarily painful. It was so at that point when I was 30, I was suffering from very severe depression and anxiety. Also was actually living in mainland China at the time. My husband had started a social enterprise and we moved to China to help set up the manufacturing operations there. And even though I'm Chinese American, but did not grow up in China, spent very little time there, had very little exposure to the culture. And so it very much felt like being in a foreign country. And so there was that extra stress of, being in a place that was very unfamiliar to me, not having our typical community of support, working ridiculous hours on a startup. I think startups bring their own particular challenge. And it was so much that I just I think because I didn't let myself stop, basically my body shut down because it was the only way to get me to stop. And so I just had, very severe anxiety, very severe depression for a good year and a half. So this was a much longer recovery period because it was such a severe burnout and I had done such a poor job of taking care of myself, of paying attention to all of the red flags and warning signals that my brain and my body had been giving me for years. And I think a huge part of the process was letting go of who I thought I was or who I thought I wanted to be. So I wanted to, I mean, I talk about this in the book where I wanted so badly to be like Mother Teresa or Gandhi or Martin Luther King. And that's sort of what I was aspiring to be. And then to recognize that that's not actually who I am. I resisted letting go of that for a very long time. It may not take others as long. But there was this sort of letting go of just a sense of identity that or at least what I had built my identity around, and I had to give myself a lot of compassion and a lot of grace and recognize like you're somebody else, you're going to operate in the world a different way, and that's okay. That's still really meaningful, that's still really important. But all of this energy that I was spending toward, I'm going to be someone that I'm not, I'm going to be someone that other people are telling me I need to be. That was a huge part of why I was so exhausted, and why I had pushed myself so hard. And so it was through, there were some incredible people who stepped up during that phase of my life. I started meeting with a spiritual director who gave me so much insight and guidance. And I had a good friend here in the US who committed to talk with me on Skype. At that time, only Skype existed. There was no Zoom. She talked with me on Skype every week for at least, oh gosh, I think it was a couple of years. Every single week we would talk and she would check in with me, see how I was doing, let me process. That was so meaningful. And then that's actually also when I started writing. So for me, journaling, it just started as very personal. I'm just writing in my journal to process what's happening to me. And that was incredibly healing for me. But I'll say it was a good 6 months of filling my journals with pretty much just questions of why is this happening to me? Why is this so hard? Why does the work that I love why is it also causing me harm? Like I couldn't understand that. And so that's when I sort of took a turn into writing and recognizing not only was it healing for me, but it could be a really meaningful offering to give to the rest of the world. You know, the stories we tell really connect us, build our empathy, help us to understand what's going on in the world, and can move us toward action. And so I then spent a good number of years focused on writing, but still very much with pointed toward, you know, justice issues and social issues of concern. But I think that's when I had to realize, you know, there's other ways, there's other approaches, there's other professions in which you can still make a really powerful social impact. It's not going to necessarily be leading an NGO. It's not necessarily going to be at the front of a march, but it still matters and it still makes a difference.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think one of your gifts, like you just said in your writing, is kind of opening up your interior to the exterior and showing us all that it's probably a lot more common than we think it is to grapple with these big questions. You know, what am I here for? Why is something I care about so much, keeping me up at night or causing me this physical distress? I think, it's just a really beautiful demonstration of that exploration that I think many of us go through at different periods of our life. And obviously a big part of your book. And I'm curious, when did you connect to like being a sensitive soul, or when did the word sensitive come into your kind of consciousness?
Yeah, I have an older sister who is a psychologist. And so it was a good maybe 7, 8 years ago now that she brought up to me, hey, have you ever heard of this personality trait called highly sensitive? And I hadn't. And so, you know, she sent me all these resources. And at first I was resistant because, you know, she's my older sister and I don't want her to be right. But the more I read into it, the more I was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense and explains a lot about who I am, how I've been operating in the world. So it's, you know, if you haven't heard of it, it's okay because it's actually a relatively new concept. I think it's only been around for about 30 years. Dr. Elaine Aron is the psychologist who coined the term and has done a ton of research around it, but it's definitely growing in people knowing about it and being aware of it. And you know, highly sensitive individuals are people who sensory wise experience the world more intensively. So if you find that you may be bothered by very loud noises, or you're more sensitive to smells or tastes, then that may be a sign that you're sensitive. And highly sensitive folks also are very deep feelers, as you can imagine. So we're emotionally sensitive. It is true that our feelings are easily hurt, but also like we're deeply empathetic. So we really kind of tune into the emotions and the vibe of individuals that we're interacting with, of groups, of even like if we walk into a room, you know, oftentimes you'll kind of get a sense of like, oh, what's going on in this room and what is the feel of it. And then I would say the other major trait of highly sensitive people is that they're very deep thinkers. So they tend to spend a lot of time processing, contemplating, planning, and they're just very deliberate, you know, in how they move forward. They're not the kind of people who are just going to jump right in to things that we're not necessarily super great at being spontaneous, because we like to think through things, and then after something's happened, we like to process through it. So there's just a lot going on internally. So it's actually really beautiful in that highly sensitive people have this very, very rich internal life, internal experience. But I have found that when you have an intensive internal life and you place yourself in environments where it's also very intense, so working, you know, in an NGO, working for justice causes is very intensive, right? It can feel like you're being bombarded on all sides. But so that's sort of where I first began to have some sense of what it meant to be highly sensitive. But it wasn't until I had the idea for this book, which was the summer of 2020. So wherever you are in the world, you can probably remember that that was not a great time. So here in the US, that was when the pandemic was really spiking. And we had George Floyd had just been murdered. All the Black Lives Matter protests were happening around the country and the world. And it was a time where there was so much turmoil. And I desperately wanted to become involved. I wanted to do something around Black Lives Matter and the racial injustice that we were seeing. I wanted to get involved with all of the social and economic inequities that were being exposed by the pandemic. And then I realized that I had so much fear about jumping back in. At this point, I had been writing for a good decade. And so the thought of like jumping back into direct activism, it was this weird push and pull of like, I so desperately wanted to do it. And I was so scared to do it because I was so scared of the toll that it could take on me. And I did not want to sink back in to that very deep, dark hole that I had been in years before. Since then I've had 2 kids and I don't have the flexibility. I don't have the space in my life anymore to sink into a depression for a year and a half. My family needs me. And that's when I realized I think this is the struggle I've had for the last, 15, 20 years, is that I'm a sensitive soul. I love the work of justice, and yet I have not yet figured out how to do it in a way that is healthy and sustainable and true to who I am. And so I wrote this book to basically answer that question for me, and learned a ton in the process, and certainly hope that it's helpful for others as well.
Thank you so much. It's definitely been helpful for me, and I know it's been helpful for many, Dorcas. And I'm curious, in writing your book and kind of grappling with this concept of like the ideal activist and finding your identity separate from that, like what has learning about sensitive souls and the role that they can play, what has that unlocked for you, or what has that made more spacious or permissible? Like what, I don't know, the word freedom is coming up in a way, like what kinds of,
I think that's a great word.
Educate us. What freedom do you find?
Yes, I think a lot of cultural context, depending on where you are, as well as organizational context, or even like a particular cause or movement that you might be in, right? There is very much this real pressure. It is not imagined, it is demonstrated by research that there is a very real pressure to be a certain type of activist, to be super assertive, to be out there, to be working constantly. If you take a weekend off, if you take a brief vacation, or if you just want to take a nap in the middle of the day, that is seen as you demonstrating your lack of commitment to the cause, right? There is very little space and grace given for rest, for joy, for recovery, for restoration, whatever it is that we feel like we need in the very, very hard work that we are doing. And so when you are up against those sorts of messages and that kind of culture, there is very much a sense that as a sensitive person, you're just deficient because you can't live up to that ideal. You can't be that person, and you can try really, really, really hard. So highly sensitive people tend to be people pleasers because we're so attuned to what other people want and their emotions and how they respond to us. And yet, we, as I said, it just takes so much out of us to contort ourselves into somebody that we're not, to push ourselves far beyond who we actually are, to try to meet somebody else's standard. And so in researching this book, in reflecting on my own personal experiences, it has been so much about coming to not only accept, but truly appreciate and embrace who I am. Knowing that, Dr. Erin is so great about explaining that the world absolutely needs sensitive people. So latest research says that somewhere in the range of 20 to 30% of the population is probably highly sensitive, which is not a small amount. It is a minority, but it's not a small minority. And so whether or not you are highly sensitive, you definitely know somebody who is. But we play a really important role in sort of offering a counterbalance to our sort of more aggressive, more assertive, more loud and dominant peers. You know, they bring their own gifts, but you can probably imagine what might happen to our communities and our organizations if we only had people who operated in that way, right? But sensitives are the ones who they're gonna encourage us to slow down. They're going to be people-centered more than anything else. They're going to ensure, like, is everybody included? Is everybody at the table? Whose voice is not being heard? Who is being left out? What else do we need to think about before we jump into this plan or this strategy? They have a really wonderful gift of sort of noticing and seeing things that others may not see, you know, the flaw in like this plan or what we're missing or what else we need to do. Dr. Aaron calls us like priestly advisors. So there is this particular kind of wisdom that sensitive souls bring to the table, and we need that so desperately. So to recognize that and to embrace that and be like, okay, this is who I am. And it's a wonderful thing. It is not a deficient thing. It's a very good thing. And that I can, just as who I am with my gifts, but also my limitations, right? There are real limitations to being sensitive. But I can still be in the world in a way that feels like it's meaningful, that I'm making an impact, that I'm making life a little bit better for the people around me. And so there has been some measure of freedom of just, I don't have to be someone else. I can be me, and I can do work that is super meaningful, and I can actually find some joy and receive nourishment from what I'm doing. It's not just an outpouring. Sometimes it will be, but I do believe for us to sustain this work, you know, we don't just pour out, we have to receive as well. And one of the most important things in receiving is just acknowledging who you are and finding a role, a career, a volunteer opportunity, whatever, that really fits and gives you that sense of joy and fulfillment of like, this is exactly who I am and what I was made to do.
Beautiful. I'm curious about, I know in your book you kind of tell a few stories of sensitive souls who have made a contribution in ways that maybe haven't been as celebrated historically. I'm curious if there's a woman that comes to mind where you can kind of place her in a role or a position that can bring it to life for us of how the contribution matters.
Yeah, absolutely. So one woman who came to mind is Septima Clark. She was a leader in the civil rights movement in the 60s here in the US. And her primary role in the civil rights movement was as an educator. So, you know, she wasn't necessarily out there like Dr. King and others like him, right? But she played an absolutely pivotal role in educating Black Americans. She had a particular focus on literacy and on citizenship. And but it was all for the end goal of empowerment, right? And I think that her work, you know, even Wikipedia says is that her work was dismissed by other civil rights leaders, especially the men. You know, they didn't think that what she was doing was that important, but she was investing in thousands and thousands of people, teaching them how to read, teaching them how to know what their rights were, teaching them how to vote, teaching them how to participate in society, giving them the tools so that they could open a bank account, so that they could register for different programs, so that they could apply for things. And that in turn made them into much more empowered citizens who could act, you know, on their behalf and on the behalf of their communities. And so the work of Septima Clark was very much, I feel like, a foundational piece in, you know, the civil rights movement only was able to make progress because of the scale of how many people were involved, right? We hear a few names thrown around oftentimes, but I mean, it's hundreds of thousands of people who in their own ways, right, in their own daily lives, made choices to advocate for civil rights for themselves, for their families, for their neighborhoods and communities. And so Septima Clark's willingness to be there as an educator, as a mentor, as an equipper, really, right? Giving them the tools that they needed to move forward. That was incredible. I do not think that the civil rights movement would have been able to move forward as much as it did without that kind of work. And Dr. Martin Luther King actually, called her the mother of the movement, because ultimately they did recognize that she was key. She and her fellow educators and the work that they were doing was absolutely essential to the movement that they were trying to build.
Beautiful. So educator is one way, kind of one archetype, it sounds like, that sensitive souls can really thrive in their contribution. I'm curious, through your research, many of us on this call might still be kind of searching for our ways of contributing best. Like, what other archetypes have emerged as really well suited to sensitive souls?
Yeah, so I mean, that was a huge thing that I wanted to do in this book, was to expand our definition of what it means to be engaged in social activism. That marching, petitioning, canvassing, that's great, super effective. And you need so many other approaches in order to move the needle on social change in our societies. And so I was trying to figure out who else has done this in the past. What other individuals and groups can we learn from, that they may not be the folks who end up on the cover of a magazine or have, long biographies written about them, but their work was so meaningful and contributed in really powerful ways to social change happening. And so a few categories that I came up with, and this is by no means meant to be all inclusive, right? This is sort of just meant to spark your imagination of beginning to think, okay, there's some other approaches that that I could consider that might be a fit for me, and that will still be very, very meaningful. So I talk about folks who are connectors, individuals who just love meeting people, having conversations with people, building friendships, building relationships. One of the most incredible statistics I came across in my research was organizational psychologist Adam Grant did a survey of 500 studies. So he looked at all of these other studies that had been done, and they all consisted of two individuals who did not previously know each other, who were from different backgrounds, either different ethnic backgrounds, different nationalities, different religious backgrounds, whatever, and brought them together for face-to-face conversation. So not a Zoom conversation, a face-to-face conversation. And the purpose of the conversations was not about convincing each other of anything, not about debating anything, not about trying to prove you're right. It was just about getting to know each other. And across those 500 studies, Grant found that 94% of the time, just a simple face-to-face friendly conversation of genuine curiosity, of really wanting to get to know one another, 94% of the time, that reduced prejudice and bias. And so there's actually a lot of power in how we talk to people, how we engage with people, our willingness to build friendships across social lines, political lines, whatever, to seek out people who are different from us. That's key, I think, to having people move toward a willingness for societies to be more diverse and inclusive and just. I have a chapter where I talk about creatives, right? So artists, writers, musicians, right? I think if we look through at any movement, you will see that artists are at the heart of what those movements have done, because art appeals to people in different ways. It speaks to the soul in ways that speeches alone can't necessarily do, right? And so they represent so much of the hope and the vision of what movements are working towards. I also talk about record keepers, which this was a really fun one. to research, because it kind of snuck up on me. I wasn't thinking about this, but people who are historians, librarians, documentarians, these are the folks who are telling us what has happened in the world in the past, what is happening now, and they are documenting it for us so that we know, so that we have the facts, the information, and that allows us to learn from our past mistakes and to act on, what is happening now? How can we do things differently? How can we do things better? And one really interesting fact is that, when you see authoritarian leaders or governments, when they begin to really crack down on dissenting voices within the public, a lot of times they start with artists and historians and documentarians, because that is who they genuinely see as a threat, because these are the people who they're telling it like it is and getting out the message of what it is that we need to know. I also talk about builders, folks who are engineers, inventors, product designers, who are making new technologies that give people greater access to opportunities, to information, to education, and improves their quality of life. Equippers is where teachers, mentors, coaches, all that would fall under there. And then finally, researchers. They're kind of similar to record keepers in that they look very closely at a problem, an issue, and they help us to unpack it. What is truly going on here? Who is being affected? What are the root causes of the social injustices that we're witnessing? And we need that information in order to know how to respond. So these are all folks who are not necessarily at the front. We're not necessarily going to see them in the public eye a lot, but what they do, I think of it like it's sort of the framework of everything else. Without that, it's the scaffolding. Without that kind of work, you don't have a place upon which somebody like a Gandhi or Dr. King can stand. They need to stand upon the work and the contributions of so many other people who have helped bring to light what it is that's going on and how it needs to change.
I have so many questions about each of those for you, Dorcas, but I think the last thing I'll ask you before we open it up to everyone else is, I'm just curious, like, what is your vision for the world? Like, what's possible when more sensitive people maybe identify with that or give themselves permission to be that? Like, what's different about society, how we are as humans? Like, what's better or different about the world?
Yeah, well, I would love for change to begin within activist movements itself and within NGOs and nonprofits, advocacy organizations, and that there is sort of a troubling tendency in recent years, and I think social media has definitely been part of this, where our first response, um, and I guess it's okay as a first response, but maybe I should say our lasting response, the fuel for so much of the work that we do is anger. And I do think that there is a lot in the world to be angry about, and that makes a lot of sense. And anger is a very powerful emotion in that it gets us to move, it gets us to act. It's a great motivator. But in the long run, I talk about this in my book. I see anger as a really blunt instrument, in that if you're constantly wielding anger, using that as your source of energy, you begin to kind of lose sight of some of even the people right in front of you, where it becomes really easy to sort of just lash out at everybody. And there is very much this this culture within activism now of I talked about the impossible standards we're holding one another to, right? Like, you have to be working 24/7 or you don't care about the movement at all. You have to talk a certain way. If you use the wrong words, if I disagree with you on one issue, but I agree with you on 100 others, I still can't work with you because that one issue is the sticking point, right? There's so many kind of black and white things that we are laying out, and pushing people away instead of drawing them in. Like, it's almost like we're working extra hard to create more categories of othering people, even if we're working towards the same cause. And so there's a lot of conflict, there's a lot of infighting, there's a lot of just critiquing one another, tearing each other down. And I don't think our societies are going to get better if the leaders of who is pushing for positive social change can't even be kind and compassionate toward one another and toward themselves. Then I don't know that we have the ability to do that on a broader scale. And so I think we start with ourselves of, what does it look like for me to truly be more compassionate, more gracious, and more understanding toward people who are different from me, toward people who think differently from me? How do I invite people into the causes that I care about in a way that is truly warm and welcoming and makes them feel like they're a part of it, as opposed to you have to, check all these 20 boxes before we're even going to let you in the door. So I think that's what I would really love to see. And that is where I feel like sensitive souls can be such a model, because I feel like that's sort of our default. I mean, for one thing, we hate conflict. So, and we love people. We have this intuitive sense of how to connect with people. And so it is our nature to want to be more inclusive, to want to invite people in, and to try to see people just first and foremost as human beings. Like you're not like here in the US, it's not just that you're a Democrat or a Republican. It's not just that you're from a particular ethnic group or that you're from a particular economic or social class. It's that you are a human being and I am a human being. And in that, there is so much that we can connect on, that we can love about each other, that we can support each other in. And it's through those genuine relationships. And I think genuinely trying to see the good in one another, no matter how different we are. I mean, that's ultimately at the very, very core of what Gandhi and Dr. King taught, right? Their vision was far beyond just, let's change a few policies, let's, have some, get more freedom, get more independence. Those are all very, very important things. But both of them had this far vaster vision of, and let us create what Dr. King called a beloved community where everybody is truly appreciated, accepted, loved, and able to live with dignity and with hope, and with opportunity. And I think that begins with how we treat one another, with how we see one another, and our desire for social change to be for the good of everybody, not just me or people who look like me or people who think like me, but what does it look like for society to truly be a just place for everybody, whether or not I'm comfortable with you, whether or not I like you, whether or not I agree with you, but I still want good for you. I think that's where I really hope that we can get to, and where I would love to see, sensitive souls kind of step into that place and speak into that vision.
So many strengths to uplift in our sensitive soul.
Absolutely.
Thank you for bringing that to the surface more and putting words to it and giving those of us a place to find ourselves in. So appreciate it, Dorcas.
Yeah, pleasure.
I would love to open it up to anyone on this call who has a question for Dorcas. You can either come off mute and ask directly, you can put it in the chat, whatever you're comfortable with. You can raise your hand. You also don't have to raise your hand. Feel free to jump in.
I guess I have a question. I'm sorry, it's a little rough. I hope you can hear me. Dorcas, thank you so much for extending your it was a beautiful conversation. I'm curious if there's some sort of practice that you found that you return to daily to kind of ground yourself in healthy self-care.
I will be honest and say that I don't know that I do anything daily, though I absolutely should. I have 2 young kids, and life just is life, and sometimes you get to do your practices, and sometimes you don't. But I will say that I am in the last 2-3 years, I have had the privilege of being able to work alongside and learn from some individuals who really identify as contemplatives. And that can sometimes be tied to a particular faith tradition and sometimes not. But people who really value this idea of slowing down, of balance, of integration, where it is not just about doing, but it's also about being. And so in that, I have learned a number of practices from these friends that have been so helpful for me and that I really should do more often. So one is loving kindness prayers or meditations, which I think a lot of folks may be familiar with. That has been particularly helpful for me when I find myself feeling very angry, when I find myself feeling very frustrated with others and with the world. But it grows my compassion and my empathy for others. Yeah, so that is a practice that I hold on to. I'm from a Christian background, so I do something called breath prayers, where they're just very simple, very short prayers, like one line, two lines at the most, and you kind of repeat it and meditate on it. And I find that and you really focus on your breath, and it helps release a lot of that stress and that tension, and renews a sense of hope in me. Like many, I would imagine, I love being in nature. I love being around art and beauty that infuses me with so much hope and inspiration. And it kind of gives me a picture of, this is what we're working toward, is a world that is beautiful in every way. And so those are some of the things. I think a lot of it also is just kind of being present and being kind to yourself. And one of the pieces of research that I really loved was I came across the work of Kristen Neff, who is a professor at Stanford University, and she writes a lot about self-compassion. That's her area of expertise. And I think especially in the activism world, there is this sense that self-compassion feels very selfish, right? That if you're just focused on yourself and being nice to yourself, like, what is that? But she has found that very consistently, the more we practice self-compassion, the more capacity we have to have compassion for others. It's like we have to practice it on ourselves, and then we learn how to extend it to other people. If we can't even be kind and compassionate to ourselves, it actually makes it harder for us to be compassionate toward others. And it's not like compassion is this finite resource. Like it is infinite. It can keep growing. And so the more compassion you practice to yourself and those closest to you, the more you have to give to others. And so those have all been practices, frameworks that have helped me. Yeah, but definitely need to work on the integrating them more regularly, because I absolutely feel the difference in my mind, in my body, in my spirit when I do it and when I don't.
Awesome. In the chat, Jacqueline asked a interesting question, Dorcas. How do you make peace with the fact that your impact in the world is limited and that you can't jump on all causes you care about?
Yeah, that's a really hard one, actually. I will be honest. I think those of us, it is both a strength and a challenge of highly sensitive people that we care deeply, like care so deeply, and we want to fix everything. We want to make everything better. And we see, because of our perceptiveness, right, and our ability to notice things, we see everything that's wrong with the world, and it really bothers us. And so I feel like there's a lot of goodness in that desire to want to do everything and to want to fix everything. And then I think just recognizing, yeah, I am but one person. And there is incredible beauty in us being interdependent and relying on one another, in us having faith in one another, that whatever I can't do, I have to believe that someone else is going to step up and do it. you know, that I am not the only one in the world who cares about this issue, who sees this thing that's going on. There are so many others. And there really are. You know, I think we get inundated with all of the negative, despairing messages through news and social media, but there really are so many people who care so deeply and are doing wonderful things all around the world. And so to look for those people, to trust that they're there, and to, I think, recognize that it's not on my shoulders alone, that I am not in this by myself. And I think another aspect of it is the recognition that the things that we do that may feel very small to us, I don't know that, you know, if you're very fortunate, maybe you'll see the full impact of that. I would guess most of the time we don't. And so it is a little bit of a faith exercise to also believe that the small things that I am doing now can have an impact far beyond what I could even imagine, you know, either to someone else, maybe, you know, to my kids, to like, it could spread much farther than what you think. You know, maybe you have an influence on one person and that one person ends up, you know, doing something incredible and you got to play a part in that. I mean, how amazing is that? And so I think to recognize that we're part of a gigantic puzzle of how this is all going to come together. And I feel like my responsibility is to do the best with what I've been given and what I'm able to do. And to just trust that there are others who will step up, and that it's a wonderful thing to see others flourish and others step into their leadership and thrive in their own area of work too.
A lovely reflection on the power of community, which is a big part of why we're all here. So thanks for that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's super encouraging to see you all here on this call. I love it.
Thank you. I would love to keep offering the chance for others to ask questions, but I also want to be respectful of everybody's time. Charlie, I would love if you would put in the chat the link to where people could find Dorcas's book, this one and her others, and read more about her work. Yeah, just have to like encourage you all to check it out or get it as a gift for those you love in your life. It's a beautiful, well-researched story and reflection guide, really, in lots of ways. So thank you for this gift, Dorcas. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for everyone who was here to participate and listen. I hope you walk away with something valuable and more to reflect on for yourself.
Thank you so much, Dorcas. It's such an important conversation that you're bringing forward. And I think it's one that we don't spend enough time on, both recognizing the power and contribution of sensitive people and introverts and, you know, all of the things that you
Very
talked
much.
about. And also the challenges, you know, so I think you did such a beautiful job of bringing forth both of those things, the gifts and the challenges, and some clear ways that we can include sensitive people, or if we are those people ourselves, where we can value ourselves more and really see the impact we're having. So what a beautiful contribution you're making in the world, Dorcas. You're touching so many people.
Thank you. Yeah, that means a lot. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for coming. It's so wonderful to see members of our community here, and stay tuned for more Global Ignite sessions throughout the year. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Brittany, for hosting and interviewing so beautifully.
Pleasure.
Bye, everybody.
Hearts and claps to everyone.